to Sonder Sisterhood. This is a YouTube channel for the single and also the childless, not by choice person. And today we are finally doing the live for our next book club. And I think I'm going to be separating this book club into 3 different sections because in this book, he talks about be at peace with life just as it is in 3 different levels, and he has those separated by sections. So I think that's how we'll do it today. So we're going to kick it off with level 1 today. And as a reminder, the book is F It, Be at Peace with Life Just as It Is by John C. Parkin. So let's just get into it, shall we? I hope everyone's having a really good weekend. So he talks about F it, be at peace with life just as it is. And he talks about separating this and conceptualizing this, or sort of like the mentality that we as humans kind of go through across 3 different levels. And the level 1 is he talks about how you're stressed and you don't find that peaceful. And you kind of constantly sort of worry about where you're at, where others think of you, or how others think of you, and how that kind of blocks and bothers people. Then he talks about moving from there into level 2, which is you are finding ways to be peaceful and you start to kind of find ways to not be bothered so much about the expectations of others, or society, or what others think. And I think a lot of us kind of hang out in that realm a little bit, particularly as we get older. We kind of recognize, hey, I need to start kind of focusing on what I think. And then there's this level 3 where he talks about where being at peace with life just as it is comes from. And it's you actually find a way to be at peace with the fact that you are going to be stressed at times, and that stress and peace is a natural part of life, and kind of learning to accept the moment and accept where you are. As I was reading this first part of the session, as I was reading this first part of the book, I was really thinking, yeah, he's kind of really making the point to bring yourself back into the moment. There are some aspects of like radically accepting where you are that I think is maybe where we're going to land. In the therapy world, we kind of call that radical acceptance, which is from DBT, a type of modality where, listen, there are lots of things we can't change, so we have to accept it. I've also heard the quote that's a lot about don't try and avoid the rain, but learn to dance in the thunderstorms. I think I butchered that, but it's in that same area. And so that's really, I think, a lot of the premise of what we're going to get to with the book. So let's talk about the first section. So one of the things, and this is on page 3, he says, as we get closer to level 1, when we understand that we do most things and aim at most things in order to feel something in particular. And I think this is really true. And he goes on to say that when you're young, you might be thinking like the thrill, the excitement. I think a lot of us, just in terms of social media and kind of what this conversation talks about now, we're all talking about like chasing the dopamine hit, right? And yeah, I think it's really hard to be at peace when you're constantly chasing that next thing or that next feeling. Hi, Adele. So I thought that was a really good point in that. And then as we get older, I think that's then where some of societal expectations come into play in terms of how people or how society defines success. And so then maybe we start chasing these definitions of success that we're told are successful. Maybe we're chasing a partnership. Maybe we're chasing having a quote unquote family that fits more into this definition that we're told in terms of kids. Maybe we're chasing money. Maybe we're chasing that job promotion. we are doing things in order to make us feel a certain way. Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're discussing Be at Peace, Be at Peace with Your Life Just As It Is by John Parkin, which is our book club book right now. And then again, sometimes we're also chasing things for like avoidance, relaxation to kind of numb us out, because I do think this process is a really up and down thing. And it's stressful in and of itself when we're chasing something outside of ourselves in order to help ourselves feel better. I also think, when you talk about it from this perspective of, I'll speak for me a little bit, when you talk about it from the perspective of living a life where maybe you don't have some of the things that society sort of identifies as successful, right? Like this long-term marriage or children, for example, it may put more pressure on those other things then that society does deem successful. For me, that's work, financial stability. So I am kind of constantly chasing feelings of fulfillment and success, confidence in that area, because I know there's this other area that outsiders looking in may question. Just hustling all the time to reach the goal. That's a really good way of conceptualizing and putting that. Essentially, we are constantly living outside of the moment, and constantly chasing that next thing. And again, you can't hit peace when you're constantly chasing something. Like, talk about stress, right? He also talks about this from the sense of I'll be at peace when. And I think we can all relate or resonate with that, whether it's I'll be at peace when, I'll be happy when, I will do this thing that I really want to do when. Thank you. For me, I conceptualize and frame this a lot around me being like risk averse. Well, it's another way of saying this, right? Like I am really wanting to feel certain feelings in certain areas because I don't feel them in other areas. And so it's very, very risky for me then to upend the apple cart in these areas. Hi there. Again, this is also how people kind of talk about wishing their life away. In terms of, I wish this other thing was different. I would be happy when, I'll be successful when this thing happens, when this person changes, maybe when this person's out of office, when I have this job, when I get this promotion. These are constantly living in the future. And as he moves further into this chapter, he really starts to highlight, and he makes this point really hard, that the goalpost keeps then changing. Because what happens when we then get that promotion, or we make that certain income level, or we get married, or we reach some certain milestone? Generally, the goalpost changes. Generally, now we're like, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to move on to this next thing. And so we're constantly changing the goalpost. Again, how can you be at peace with life as it is when you get the thing you want, that you then decide, actually, that's not enough. I'm now going to go to the next thing. I now need this next thing. We're constantly chasing, constantly moving in the future. He talks about an example of when he was a kid, like always looking for the school breaks, the holidays. And again, it's helpful in the moment, but it's not where the outside things isn't what's going to drum up happiness. It's how we perceive it, how we then integrate those things into how we talk to ourselves, I think is where peace generally comes. Again, radical acceptance, being at peace with where things are, and that life is going to feel real hard and stressful sometimes. And maybe it's not about trying to run away from those things, but again, learning to manage and cope within that time and knowing that it's going to come. and it can help you kind of slide out of it into the next thing a little bit sooner. All right, so as he moves on, again, he talks a lot about all the different ways in which we are talking about the future. So he's like, I'll be at peace when I graduate from school. I'll be at peace when somebody else says yes. I'll be at peace when I have my own car. I'll be at peace when I find my own job. He like goes through sort of these adult milestones and on and on and on through it. And you're like, yeah, I've said all those things. All of that thing is relatable. All of those things are relatable. All of those things make sense. And he just really makes this point. And so one of the things he suggests then to do is, instead of asking yourself, like, what do you want to do in the future? Meaning, what do you want to do next year? Ask yourself, or include this part when you start to ask yourself those questions, is, what do I want to do this afternoon? What do I want to do today? And I think that's a huge mindset shift for a lot of people. I think we talk about those like 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plans, but we don't always talk about, what do we want to do today? And maybe it's go for a walk. Maybe it's doing something more relaxing or peaceful. And those are all the things that will also help you hit those longer term goals too. And again, he talks about how we're kind of trained to sort of think about the future. And, when I think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint, there's probably like a protectiveness and survivalness around that, right? Like, I think we've talked about this a little bit in some of the other book clubs we've done, how there's probably an evolutionary benefit to constantly thinking about what's next and how to get there, and maybe not being okay where you're at in the moment. However, we now live in different times and in different situations. Some of us, not all of us, I want to be really clear about that. Some of us are in an active daily survival mode, and some of us who are not in that, you ask yourselves, why can we not be satisfied? Why are we so unhappy? Why are we not at peace when we have all of these things? Well, yeah, because you're constantly chasing something instead of being, quote, at peace with your life just as it is. He kind of talks about this in terms of different circles of control. And I'm going to read from this. It's it's page 18. Thank you. Thanks for subscribing and putting that out there. The circle of control is a concept that says there are things in life that we can control, or we think we can, such as what we eat. And then outside the circle of control is the circle of influence. And this is where we can't fully control the outcome, but we can influence. I think sometimes we also like really overly amplify how much we can control too. And then a lot of self-blame comes when there are things that we feel like we should be able to control that ultimately we can't, because we can't control other people. But a lot of us, like the human nature aspect of it, is to think that it can be very egocentric, I guess. And that, like, kids do this a lot, right? Like they think they can control all of these things and then feel sometimes a lot of guilt and shame around that. One of the classic examples is like when their parents get divorced, a lot of kids will blame themselves, even though they have nothing to do with that. But they think somehow if they would have done something different, right? Then outside that is the circle of concern, where we can't control the outcome and we can't really influence it, but we're concerned about it. So this might be like things that are happening in faraway places or not so far away places, that we as individuals can't control but feel really awful about. And he then goes on to say that a quote, rational route through this question of finding our peace suggests that we should concentrate on only the things that we can control. So it would make more sense to believe we can be more at peace when we've passed our exams and then when like world peace has been achieved. Essentially kind of recognizing what can I control and manage that, because you're gonna, and we do this all the time. Like there's things we cannot control. Maybe we have a slight influence on, but still not really a control around. And these are the things that we focus and put most of our energy on. Like again, Taylor Swift on that podcast said, our energy is expensive. Like we don't have an infinite amount of it each day. And so when you spend your energy on things you cannot control, you're going to feel real powerless, probably depressed, anxious. And and please know this is where I live a little too often. And so that's why I choose these books. Because these are good reminders of me. Like if I'm going to spend my energy and it's expensive, where can I get the biggest bang for my buck? Right? And so I might be able to control more of what I'm putting in my body, how I'm moving my body, who I'm around in terms of who supports me. I might even kind of get a little bit bigger in that, and what type of job that I have, or where I'm living, or how I'm spending my time, or what thoughts that I tell myself. These are the things that we can control. And so, I'm pretty certain this book is going to move into evolving because these are the things you can control. This is how you find your peace. And probably like reshaping how we conceptualize, and in the therapy world we call it cognitive restructuring. Adults absolutely do that too. In fact, this whole level is a lot of this whole like first chapter of the book. The first level is he basically just drills it into you, and he has like 20 different scenarios that is essentially like the milestones that we're all told adults need to go through, right? You get the job, you get the car, you get the house, then you pay off, like when I have less financial stressors, when work changes. He goes through all of these things, and he really emphasizes this point that every time you get the thing you think you want, you then come up with something else. Yes, I am a therapist on my non-YouTube life. So he then closes this part, which this is page 18 as well. And I start this because I really think this is a really good point for us to think about, is, in other words, to rely on others for your sense of peace, even your nearest and dearest, is not a particularly functional way to go about things. And again, because you cannot control them. You can't control them. So again, we're going through, and he's just talking about all the different ways in which we do this. He talks about, he had some career, I don't know why I can't speak today. I think somebody said that in the chat, and it's true. He goes through some career goals, and he hits that goal, and then he uses, I want to be a published author. And then he's like, then I become a published author. And then I'm like, well, now I want to be a successful published author. And so then he's like, well, how many do I need to sell for that? So and now he's like, well, now I want more than one. So we just keep chasing this thing. Then he, again, talks about all of these, like the peace doesn't last long when you stay in level 1, when you're constantly chasing the next thing. You might have peace for a short amount of time when you feel that success, or in today's language, kind of that dopamine hit, but it doesn't stay, right? Like you're constantly chasing external feelings in order to help you feel at peace. So essentially, again, he talks about be at peace, going through all these different milestones, and that we're told that going through and hitting these milestones will bring happiness. And again, that is, if I take it to this channel, which is about, not having children when you wanted them, or maybe not being married or having a partner. i- These are things we are told we need in order to be at peace. And so when those things aren't happening, we can feel not at peace, right? Low mood, depression, things like that, anxiety. And so I chose this book for our book club because how do we reframe and reconceptualize that? And I think, we're talking about it in terms of being childless, not by choice, maybe single, but there's lots of other like things that I think people can use for this. If you don't have the job that you want, right? Or the job that you were told you needed to have, or live in the place that you want, or the house that you want, it's it impacts our peace because we're chasing external stuff. And I don't mean like necessarily objects, but I mean we're chasing external validation, right? People living the lifestyle you're talking about age fast and are generally unhappy. I mean, there is data to show that. And I also think, I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's because of what he's talking about. They stay in this level one where they are able to achieve those points, like those mile markers, for lack of a better word, but it's never enough. And so they're constantly chasing the next thing because now there's a whole lot of expectations that come externally around those things too. So it's a really good point. Again, just I'm going to go through, like, I'll be at peace when we have a family. I'll have peace when the kids are off to school. I'll be at peace when we manage to pay the bills and the mortgage. I'll be at peace when we have a larger house. I do want to kind of, and I think he makes this point here too. I do think there are some like basic hierarchy of needs that if you don't have them, you probably need them to have some semblance of stability and thriving and peace. So, like, if you don't have food, shelter, or some basic accommodations, living in war zones, things like that, like, yeah, like, I think this is really talking about when kind of your basic needs are met and those hierarchy of needs are met, right? So I want to just make that point and kind of be clear around that. Like, we all do have some basic needs and some basic safety things that there are some external things that do have to come. Now, I will say, I think there are some people, my work as a therapist tells me this. There are some people who live in some really hard situations that, gosh darn it, if they're not able to like find peace, or like really thrive. And so I do think, again, as long as you're like physical safety, food, water, shelter, if you have those things, I think um, even in under harsh situations, you can find this helpful. But again, I don't mean to imply that we all are in the same circumstance where, we're all like, I'll be happy when I can pay my house off when some people don't even have a house. I also think this is where a lot of anxiety comes from, like constantly just worrying about keeping up with not only where we're at, but then also trying to hit the next level up, for lack of a better word, or sort of the next success. So it's not even like you're not even just managing the current state, but you're trying to like manage this future state. That is, God, that's a lot. So I'll tell you, like, for this is where I do this in my life that I want to try and stop doing. But for example, I sometimes tell myself once I have enough money to be able to move jobs, I'll be happier because then I'll be able to have less stress in my life. I'll be able to move. And I do think there is some truth to it because I work as a therapist, and then I also work in healthcare administration, and I won't go into it, but um, I I am constantly thinking like when I get to this or when I'm able to do this, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be able to sort of like live my life. And I need to make lots of sacrifices now in order to get there. And then I wake up and I'm like, holy shit, you're 46 years old and you've been saying this for 10 years. Like time is moving. Like the clock is ticking. And so I think when you're younger, you kind of feel like, yeah, I do have to do these things to set up my future life. And now I'm 46 and I'm like, okay, I'm here. Like the time is now to do this and if you're not going to make the actual changes you need to make, then you need to change your mindset and you need to change how you're conceptualizing it because staying in the current state isn't working for me. Hi to my therapist if she's watching. Because that's a big ass task. God. In fact, he even on page 48 says, if you believe that you'll be at peace when you're wealthy, the research suggests that you'll forever remain like out of reach of that because when the research says you'll remain forever 20% from peace, meaning most of us hit a goal and then we're like, well, maybe I want 20% more. And they conceptualize it and sort of have used some data to say that it's generally 20% more. And if you think about it, that just makes so much sense because if we wanted like 80% more of something, that might feel more out of reach. And it might make us feel like, yeah, I'm probably not going to get that, so I'll just be happy where I am. Where when it's 20% more, it probably just threads that needle, right? Where you're like, I can do it. And then, but it's really hard and stressful, right? So it's just in that sort of like window of feeling like you can do it. And maybe if it was further away, we would be more at peace for the present because we wouldn't be chasing that. Peace is for me guitar, nature, and exercise. I'm glad you put that in there. I've been meaning to ask that. Like, what do people feel peaceful around? For me, I think being with my dog, I have a Great Dane that's very peaceful for me. There's actually even like science that shows that strong connections with pets can even decrease I don't know if it's decreased than like cortisol levels or if it increases more of the positive. Anyway, it's helpful. And I will say that when I'm on a walk with my dog, I also feel at peace too. I'm lucky enough to like live in a place that has a lot of like nature things. I live in Colorado. And so even if I'm just out for a walk, if I just look over, I can see the mountains. And gosh, to the point of this book, I'm now sort of in this place where I want to look at the beach. Maybe if I were on the beach, I'd be happier, right? Because when I need to just be at peace with where I'm at right now. Hence why I chose this book, right? So again, the evolutionary or kind of like achievement piece of this, he goes on to say, is some people regard not being at peace as a positive thing because it spurs us to action. It spurs us to do something different sometimes. It spurs us to evolve. It spurs us to innovate. And because of that, it gets dressed in this other language. So not being at peace gets dressed in other language around like having drive, determination, ambition, but it amounts to the same thing. We've persuaded ourselves that a certain kind of restlessness is critical for our common progress. And the question I wrote underneath that is, well, what drives? Like, what's the benefit of that? And yeah, I think there is a lot of benefit to keeping people outside of peace. So then I think they're more controllable. I think you can maneuver them in order to work harder, produce more, like without kind of going down that road a little bit. There's an echelon that it's to people's advantage to have a workforce that is real ambitious. I can even remember this was early in my career. I worked in a hospital, and one of the directors made a comment about hiring a younger physician that I don't think he was younger actually, but he was a physician and he was married and had like a bunch of kids, and said, "Oh, he'll want to work a lot." And it always stuck with me. I was probably 32 when I overheard that. And I was like, wow, peace and motivation, I think, are different. I think so too. I think so too. And I think when those get disentangled, I think it's a healthier place to be, you know? And it's where, like, I think of boundaries around that too. Like being able to, I'm going to put my effort into work during work and then try and shut it off outside of that. Um, I work at home, for example. I love working at home. I hated it at first. But one of the things that sort of you have to be mindful of is that quote, right? Like, you're not working from home, you're living where you work. And it's true. It can be really hard to set some boundaries sometimes around that. Um, and again, he just emphasizes in here, when you meet a goal that's external, or you have kind of, now that you hit that thing that you said, I'll be at peace when you get there, other stuff pops up, and you're just not, you're constantly chasing and problem solving and trying to be solution focused and living in the present and worried about not living in the present, but living in the future and focusing on the future. Um, And so again, he talks about the peace runs out. When you say you're going to be at peace when you get the new job, then you get the new job, and then that peace runs out. And so it's like, well, now I'll be at peace when I get the promotion. And I think what he's doing here is really setting us up and really emphasizing this for us, so then we can start to like reframe how we're thinking things, and really making the point that this is so ingrained in us, and really trying to get us to be like recognizing it's there and then start the process to reframe it. This is a book club call about the book F It, Be at Peace with Life Just As You Are. And we're talking about pages 1 through 76 right now. What to do. An ex of mine, he said I was not ambitious enough and that had not enough saved money, and now I can't remove his voice. Yeah, I think that's his stuff that he's projecting onto you. I think that's really, really difficult. I wonder if that voice came from other places too, and he's just solidifying it. For me, I talk to a therapist. It's helpful to process what's in my head, so then I can find places for it and make sense of it. I saw this thing on Instagram, I think, where it talked about like therapeutic processing and why it's helpful. And it showed like a string that like was like all in knots and tangled, and like talking about how you're feeling out loud helps unwind it and then like re-put it back neatly in place. Not that it takes it away, but that it helps you find a place for it and make sense of it. And again, like, where do you want to be? And maybe he's assuming that your partner is a man. Maybe he's just not your man's. That's not your man's. Serena Williams said something like, why did she like marry, this isn't exactly what she said, but the takeaway that I had of it is, why did she marry her husband? And I've never forgot this. She goes, he shines my light brighter. He doesn't try and dim my light. And so that man, Marsha, sorry, Mari, sorry, that person was dimming your light. was dimming your light. And yeah, sorry, I would derail this topic by just, I'm really angry at him for you, for projecting that stuff onto you. Because ambition looks like a lot of different things, and he's missing out on partnership. That's not partnership. Um, all right. So yeah, that's where we were for part one. So let me close, and then I think someone had a question, but yeah, happy to answer questions. I may or may not answer depending on how personal it is. So this is how he ends this, and this is how I'll end sort of this discussion here. And he says, as the truth is, as we've seen, it's a fool's game to believe we can find peace by chasing after something. It's a mouse wheel that never stops turning. The only logical answer is to see that it's possible to stop running, to let the wheels slow down and find peace in the present. And damn, if that's not really good imagery, using imagery like that helps us keep it. So move off of this, right? Because this will never stop. It will never end. The goal isn't to get to a different destination when you're going in circles, but it's just to be like, hey bro, I'm getting off this ride. I'm getting off this ride. That is a question, sir, I will not be answering. I was happy and I am the type that I have enough and I am a middle incomer. I am healthy and I have enough. Yeah, that person just wasn't your person. And I know that sucks to hear because it sounds like it was really hurtful in the way and the manner in which he did that. And it's not your job to make him happy through your ambition or income. That's just not. It's not your job to make him happy. Just like it's not a man's job to make a woman happy through what he can provide through income or ambition. It's just, again, this is sort of the concept of the book. It's not another human being's job to make us happy. All right. Well, all right. So thanks for joining and coming to the live today. So this is the book club for Effort. Be at Peace with Life, Just as It Is by John C. Parkin. And so we just went over level 1, which is through page 76. And so my goal for next weekend is to go through level 2. And so if you are doing this or following along, that is page 77 to page 144. So we'll see if I do it, but I'll at least come on next weekend and we'll talk more about it. If you have other book club books that you'd like us to talk about, let me know. You can put them in the chat. Before you go, not having children and never being married is okay. Yes. Thank you. Can a person live their life without getting married ever? It starts to feel lonely when I see others. It is. It doesn't have to be lonely. And there is this element of like you're silently witnessing sort of other people go through something that you thought you would probably have, that you thought you wanted, maybe you do want. I think we grow up and this is like one of those things too, where kind of like no matter where in the world you're growing up where this is sort of an expectation. You'll get married, you'll have kids. And if you don't, particularly if you don't get married, then it's like you blame the person. And I'm not saying that, like, for me, the reason I'm not married right now is, yeah, I think there are some things I could have done differently. I'm not saying that I couldn't have done things differently. However, the hard part about it and why I can feel really lonely, I think, is we start to tell ourselves and make up reasons why that is. And oftentimes they're not great reasons. Like, oh, that's a red flag, or she's crazy, or what's wrong with her, or what's wrong with him, or and all these sort of stereotypes come forward, then they start hanging out in your head and you start saying them to yourself a lot. I also think especially when you hit a certain age, the way that society sort of structures itself, it, it you do feel very much on the outside looking in if you're not going through some of these milestones that it feels like everyone else is going through. And that feels lonely. That feels lonely. And so, and I will say that there are people in marriages that also feel incredibly lonely because they feel like they're meant to be happy, that this is what they're supposed to want. And so again, it kind of goes back to this element in the book here where it's where is your life now? And what are the things that you can do this afternoon or today in order to help yourself be more at peace where you're at? This is very hard. I'm not trying to say this in a way that's really minimizing to the feeling, but it can be lonely because there are structures around you that set it up that way. Why do I feel numb, not happy, not sad, just nothing? I would encourage you to see a therapist or go see your PCP and talk to them about that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not anyone's therapist here. But some of what you're describing could be symptoms of depression. And depression isn't anything to be ashamed of. And it's not anything that is necessarily lifelong. But you might be going through something where maybe you could use a little support, and it all our body and our brain will start to do those things, like have us not feel nothing in order to protect us from feeling some really hard stuff. So it is a way in which you're coping. And I would suggest or encourage you to talk to somebody. I think I remember you. My name is Michaela. I remember your handle. Yes, I remember your handle. I need to read that book. Yes, it is F It, Be at Peace with Life Just As It Is. John C. Parkin. He's British. I can tell by like his writing. And apparently he has a whole series of these. But this is the one that I have. Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm like moving the mouse on my computer. Let me just see if there were other questions that I missed. Good book. I have to read it. Am I pagan? That's what, okay. I live in the US. All right. So what are we doing today? I'm probably going to read a little bit more of the book, so I'm prepared for next weekend. And then I'm going to take my dog on a walk. Let me show you guys my dog. Are you going to say hi? I don't know if you can see him. So he's what brings me peace. Try not to overthink being single. You seem confident, well-spoken, and driven, and you'll find what you're looking for. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I feel I feel at peace being single most of the time. Most of the time. It's just, yeah, I feel at peace being single most of the time. Sondersisterhood is the Instagram. Thank you from the Netherlands. I found the book on Storytel app. Thanks. I'm going to read it. Oh, hello from the US. That's one of the things I love about YouTube is I find that people like talking about stuff like this, and people like talking about books together. And so I really enjoy doing this. And if there's other suggestions for books, let me know. And thanks everybody for your encouragement and your support and engaging with the live today. And I hope to see you guys on the next one. I hope wherever you are, whatever time it is, I hope you have a good rest of your day, whatever day it is. Have a good one. Bye.